Hey guys, it's Jake here with Etrailer. Today we have a 2024 GMC Sierra 2500, and we're going to be taking a look at, and I'm going to show you how to install the Airlift WirelessONE Easy Mount Compressor. This compressor is going to be designed to help inflate and deflate your airbags so that you don't have to find an air compressor or use a bike pump in order to adjust them. It'll come with a remote at a click of a button, you can inflate and deflate your airbags. This air compressor will have a 100 PSI rating, so it can air your airbags up to 100 PSI. I will say, with my experience with airbags, the compressor works pretty fast on the lower end of the spectrum, but once you get past, I'd say probably 45 or 50 PSI, it's going to take much longer to get to a higher rating. So if you constantly find yourself using 70, 80, 90 PSI, you might want to bump it up 10 PSI at a time and give it a little bit of time to rest, because it does have a duty cycle, which is the amount of time that it's designed to run at one time, and then it needs a little bit of a chance to be able to cool off. But luckily, you shouldn't have to be adjusting it that much. You'll inflate it to the desired PSI, and then you'll hold it there while you're towing your trailer. This compressor is going to have a single path design. So to explain that a little bit better, we have a manual inflation valve back here that is teed off, tied to both bags. In case of an emergency, your air compressor is not working, you can still use your airbags. We have another line coming from our air compressor back to our airbags, teed off to both airbags, and that is that's only going to have a single path. If you want a dual path because you want each of your airbags to have their own PSI, then we have another airlift compressor on our website that has a dual path design so that you can have different PSIs in those bags. Where that comes into play, a lot of people ask, why would you need a dual path? Why can't I just tie both airbags together? There's one of two things that you can use that for. The first is being, if you're having a lot of trouble with body roll in your truck, you'll want a dual path, because each bag is going to have their own PSI and it can't be transferred anywhere. If you put a T-fitting in there, the air pressure can transfer back and forth in between the two airbags. If you have a single path to each airbag, it cannot fluctuate. Another reason why I would recommend it is if you have a utility truck, something like that, that you have maybe a welder or a toolbox on one side, and you've got a lot of weight constantly on your suspension, that would be where you would want that dual path, so that you can put, say, 50 PSI in the one bag and 30 in the other, and really get your truck to level out from side to side and still get that body roll under control. Now, compared to a lot of other onboard compressors designed to fit with airbags, this compressor is going to be pretty quiet. We're standing outside the vehicle and I've got it mounted up right below this step, and we'll let you hear it. So as you can see, it's not very loud. Sitting inside the vehicle, you're not even going to be able to hardly hear it. That's a big question that we get a lot, because when you're setting up camp or tearing down camp early in the morning or late at night, that is where it comes into play. Or if you have little ones in the back seat and you don't want to have to wake them up by turning the compressor on, it's an important thing to have a quiet compressor. So this one is going to be very, very quiet for whatever reason that you need to keep it quiet. Now lastly, this compressor is going to be able to be controlled one of two ways, either the Bluetooth remote that comes with your kit or with your cell phone. You can use either one of them. I've used both. I honestly prefer the remote because I leave it in my truck on my visor and it's there all the time whenever I need it. Whenever it comes to the installation of this kit, it's a very, very, as it says in the title, a very easy kit to get installed. And that comes from the Easy Mount bracket itself. Usually you have to self-tap the bracket that the compressor is mounted to into your frame, and sometimes that is up to 7 or 8 self-tappers in the frame, and let me tell you, it's not fun to do. This one is going to come with a big enough U-bolt to go around your entire frame. The compressor mounts right up to it, and you throw a couple of lock nuts on it, and you're good to go. Then you just have to run your airline to the compressor, and then the wires from the compressor to your battery. But with that being said, let's go ahead and pull it inside and show you how we did it. To begin our installation, we're going to need to find a spot to be able to mount up our compressor. This compressor is really easy to mount up if you're not drilling any holes. You will get some self-tappers in your kit if you choose to drill into the frame. I found 2 good locations. The driver's side is kind of a no-go because it's got the major wiring harness that has all the information for the truck in it. It's about 2 inches in diameter and it doesn't want to move at all. So I found 2 locations. There's one right here that we can barely sneak the U-bolt past this support bracket. Chances are if you have a gas model and not the diesel, you're not going to have this module here. You may, we've just not seen one come through yet. This would be a better spot than right here because this is going to kind of teeter-totter on this. I did test fit it a little bit earlier and it will fit here once you tighten it down. There is one more spot. If you prefer to put it up here, you can put it right in this space, right behind your front body mount. You can put it right here. I just didn't like that because it's too close to the front tire and I don't want any mud or anything from the road to be slapped upon it. So we're going to take our compressor with the loop end of our hose facing up and we're going to stick it on our frame right here. We're using the U-bolt because it is so easy to get this mounted. If you do, make sure you go under the wiring harness that's on top of our frame rail, slide it through the upmost and lowest hole in the frame here, or in our bracket. Then we'll take a flat washer, take a flat washer, and then a nylon lock nut. Now we're going to take a 14mm socket and tighten down each of these nuts evenly. Now you don't want to crank down on this too hard. You just want to make sure that it's tight enough. Because they're nylon lock nuts, you won't have any problems. Make sure it's tight enough to where it's not going to move, and we're not moving at all. So that's good and tight. Now we can start running our airlines. Now I went ahead and ran our airlines. It's a lot easier for me to show you the path that I took than to try to walk you through the whole path because it's kind of boring to have to watch that. So we started back here with our Schrader valve. You want to put the hardware necessary to get it installed. It should come with your airbag kit. We ran our airline up, following factory wiring. You'll notice right here that I have a nice gentle loop. You don't want to kink this, any of this airline. So everything where you install it, make sure it's nice gentle curves. Ran it up over this frame rail, tied it off to factory wiring here and here, ran it into a T-fitting. The bottom of the T-fitting will go down into your airbag, come back out. Ran it across, tied it to our factory hitch. If you do not have a factory puck system here, you can tie it off to maybe this pole here. Just make sure you stay on the side because the spare tire goes on the bottom. Ran it across, put our heat shield on it so that our exhaust doesn't affect it. Ran it across behind our U-bolt for our airbag. Zip tied it to that, into another T-fitting, down out of the T-fitting into the airbag, and then ran it out and up along factory wiring on top of the frame rail. And we came out right here. I always leave myself a lot of extra length in case there's an issue later on. I'm not going to leave this whole length here, but I can tie it off to factory wiring. We're going to make a cut right here and then tie it into our compressor. Now, in order to cut airline, we're using an airline tube cutter. It's essentially just a razor blade with a flat surface. So you can do this with if you have a pocket knife, that's a razor blade. Just want to make sure you're making nice, clean, straight cuts. I highly recommend putting a new blade in your razor blade when you do this, because if you pinch it at all, it's not going to make a tight seal. So you also want a nice straight cut. See, that cut's kind of angled. You do not want that. There we go. A nice straight cut. You can see that none of the airline is pinched in there. It's a perfect circle. That's what we want. So we'll take this, kind of loop it around, and then connect it into our fitting in our compressor. And you want to make sure it goes in all the way. Give it a little tug backwards. Make sure that the teeth in our fitting are biting. And then when we go to test it, we're going to spray all of our connections with soapy water to make sure they're not leaking. But now that we've got that connected, we'll go ahead and start on the wiring. Now when starting off with your wiring, I like to start with the wires that are connected to our air compressor here. We'll have a connection to make with our big wiring harness, and then a red wire we'll have to connect to the red wire on our compressor. We'll start with our ground. On these newer Chevys, you have to, or GMCs, you have to scrape off the coating that's on the frame. It's kind of gooey. You scrape it off, and I just use some penetrating oil in order to clean the frame real well. So we'll take I drilled a pilot hole there. We'll take a self-tapping screw and tap it into the frame. There we go. It's a good solid ground. We'll tuck the wire up there out of the way. Now for our harness, you'll have this little red tab that we're going to have to click in place after we get it connected. On top of this module that says airlift on it, you'll want the red tab to be facing the frame rail. Click it into place and push that little red tab over to lock it. Now we'll grab our red wire from the compressor. We're going to cut this end off. And we're going to use some wire strippers to strip it back because we're going to use a butt connector to get it connected. We'll take a butt connector. This does not come included with your kit. We do have them available here at Etrailer if you need to pick some up. We're using a heat shrink one so that because it's outside, it'll be a lot better protected because of the heat shrink. I will use a heat source in order to shrink this up. Now we've got one more thing down here that we need to do before we run our wiring up into the engine bay and get it all connected. We've got to connect our air filter. It's essentially where your compressor is going to draw air in, and you want to make sure that's clean so that you don't corrode the inside of your compressor. So you get your air filter that comes in your kit. You'll have a short length of a little bit more flexible airline. You'll have a fitting in there. It looks like this. You want to thread that onto the back of the filter. And this doesn't have to be crazy tight because it is plastic threads. So we'll just give it a little bit more until it gives us some resistance. Now, don't let it confuse you. You will get two filters in your kit. They are spares. I've pulled these apart before. There's already one filter in there. So you've got two extra that come in your kit. It'll save you a little bit of time thinking whether or not there's one in here, but there is. So we're going to take our airline. We're going to plug it into the bottom of our compressor here. And we're going to route our tubing. You want to stay away from the compressor itself because the compressor will get hot if it has to run all the time. So we're just going to run ours loosely under here, follow some factory wiring. I'll go behind this frame support. We should have enough to go in the spot that I like to go. So there's a hole on the back side of your step on your bed. There's a hole right there. This fitting fits perfectly inside that hole. So we'll connect our airline up to the back of our filter, and then we'll stick it right in that hole. There we go. And you hear it click on both sides. You can look on the other side, make sure it's engaged, and it's not going to come out of there. And that should be high enough to where it's it'll stay high and dry, so you don't have to worry about water getting into it because you do not want that underwater, and that'll ruin your compressor. So I've had great luck with that. You can essentially go up to your bed, the floor of your bed in water, and still be fine. Now up inside our engine bay, we've got our lines that we ran up. We essentially just followed the frame rail with our wires, tied it off to existing wiring, very similar to our airlines. But the wiring we pulled up into our engine bay, you can use a fish tape, you can use an airline tube. If you got extra, you probably will have extra in your kit. Run it down, it'll come out behind the wheel well, grab it, tape it off, pull it up. So now we're up here in the engine bay. We're going to make our positive connection first. You'll have a fuse connector. You'll need to cut it in half, put a ring terminal on one end, a butt connector on the other, and then we're going to make our connection here. You want to make sure the fuse is out of the fuse holder when you do this, because if you just barely tap that positive signal on the battery, you will pop that fuse and you will not be happy because you probably don't have another fuse. So no fuse in here. We'll take a 13mm socket and get this nut removed so we can make our attachment. Pull that off. Now we'll, I like to run the wires. There's a little notch right here in the box. I like to run my wires through there because you can still get the lid closed on top of it. Put that in place. Put that on, then re-secure this nut. Now for your ground, you can ground it back onto the part of the battery, the ground on the battery if you want to. That's kind of difficult to get to with the tool, so if you ever have to disconnect the compressor, if you have a problem, it's going to be hard. So there is a accessory ground post up here on the frame rail. I did just loosen it with a 13mm socket, but we'll want to take that all the way out and then thread it back into place. And that way you can still use this as a ground if you need to jump another vehicle or anything like that. That's what it's designed for, so you don't tear up your battery post. Get our wires tucked down and away. I'll throw some zip ties on those a little bit later after we test our system. Now the last connection we have to make is going to be our pink wire. It'll be paired with the black and the red wire in the harness. The pink wire is going to be your signal wire to tell the compressor to only turn on when the ignition source is on. So you'll need to find an ignition source in your fuse panel, pick up a micro fuse tap, and then we'll show you the fuse that we found that works for the ignition source, and you should be able to tap right into that same one. Take our pink wire, run it to our fuse tap, and we're going to crimp it down. As for the fuse that we're going to be using, you'll look back here, there's a solid row of 4 10-amp fuses. We're going to grab the third one up, pop it out. Then we're going to take the 10-amp fuse, put it in our fuse tap, the one we just pulled out of our fuse panel, and then we'll take another 10-amp fuse and put it in the other location. Now we'll take our fuse tap and put it in the place of our original fuse, just like that. We'll tuck these wires down out of the way enough to where we can get the lid back on our fuse box. The last thing we're going to do is put our 15-amp fuse in our fuse holder. You will want your remote nearby and ready when you do this, because you're going to have a few minutes to get these two connected. If not, you can just pop the fuse back out and put it back in and try again. This is our pairing system, our process for our remote. And we're going to pull this little tab. The battery will connect to the remote. You just need to hit any button on there. Now we'll go inside the truck, turn the accessory mode on, and it should connect to our remote. Now we just clicked on the compressor that our remote was detecting. We've got our vehicle running, so our compressor is actually on. Now once your pairing is successful, it will say pairing successful and then start showing you the numbers. Now we'll go ahead and bump it up to 10 to make sure our compressor turns on. Yep, compressor turned on, we're good to go. Well guys, hopefully this video was able to help you decide whether or not the Airlift Load Lifter 5000 airbags are right for you and your 2024 GMC Sierra 2500.